So tonight we have I don't think I have enough fingers to count up, so we'll just say the ninth annual Scary Stories Campout. Over the next 2 hours, we will present 13 separate tales from the Scary Stories for Sleepover series of books. I have all 10 volumes, with some help from Mr. Quargan, actually. And I have carefully curated only the best of the best for your listening pleasure. So if you've missed any of those in the past, they're all on the YouTube channel. But I don't think you've heard any of these before unless you have the books. All right. Looks like everything's working. The wolves are wandering around. The cold claw is in the house. And all the best of the best and all the cool kids are here too. So, our first story is Nightmare on Sugar Dome. Oh, and if you missed it, if you don't hear me for an extended 5 to 10 seconds, it's because I have a cold and I'm doing you a mercy by muting. Cody groaned as he rolled over in bed and looked out of the window. That was a perfect day. The air was clear and the morning sunshine made the deep layer of snow on the ground sparkle. In the distance, Sugar Dome, the state's finest ski area, was gleaming in invitation. Cody looked at the book bag on the chair next to his bed. Why do I have to go to school on a day like this? He grumbled aloud and tunneled down under his comforter. Maybe you don't have to, a little voice in Cody's mind suggested. Peeking out from under the covers, Cody grinned. He had an idea. A perfectly Grinchy idea. He hustled out of bed and into his clothes, and then he shoved a pair of ski gloves and goggles into his book bag. He'd have to rent skis and poles, he thought, retrieving a cigar box from his dressing drawer. He counted out some of his birthday money, slipped some of the cash into his pocket, and he set his face in a serious expression and went downstairs. Morning, Dad, he said innocently as he slipped into his place at the table and picked up a glass of juice. Hey, kid, his father smiled. What a great day, eh? The sort of day makes you want to play hooky, doesn't it? Cody swallowed his juice a little too fast. Yeah, Dad, I hadn't even thought of that. You're right. His mom laughed. Oh, dream on, guys. She glanced at her watch. Look at the time. Cody, Dad, and I have an early appointment. Do you want us to drop you off at school? Yeah, no thanks, Mom. I'll just take the bus. So Cody was already standing at the bus stop at the end of his street when his parents drove by on their way to the real estate office. He smiled and waved, but once their car disappeared around the corner, he stepped behind the tall hedge that grew along the sidewalk. Stashing his books under the bushes, Cody waited until the big yellow school bus rumbled by. He boarded the next city bus for Sugar Dome Ski Lodge. Oh, the lodge was a great place. There was a video arcade on the lowest level, and the snack bar served the best curly fries and hot chocolate in the world. The main hall had a gigantic open fireplace and a fantastic view of Sugar Dome. Cody stood in front of a huge glass wall and gazed up at the sun-drenched mountaintop. Perfectly groomed ski runs snaked upward through the trees. Dozens of brightly dressed skiers zigzagged back and forth down the slopes. All right, Cody declared to no one in particular. To one side of the run, he could see the alpine tramway that carried skiers all the way to the peak. From where he was standing, the heavy cable that supported each of the silvery gondola cars looked like flimsy thread vibrating in the breeze. For just a moment, Cody felt a strange chill, and the light around him seemed to dim. A sensation of panic gnawed at his stomach, but the creepy feeling vanished as quickly as it had come, and Cody made a beeline for the rental shack. Hey, Tracy, he called to the tan young man behind the counter. How about a favor? What are you doing here today, Cody? His friend asked. Isn't this a school day? Yeah, but I had a doctor's appointment this morning, so my folks let me take the rest of the day off. I thought maybe you'd let me try those new skis you were telling me about. Uno momento, por favor. Must pause this thing here. Hello, Caledonia. There, that's much better. So, think you can? Think I tried those new skis? Huh, Tracy? Well, Tracy bought Cody's story about a doctor's appointment, and soon Cody was crunching through the snow toward the tram. He waited on the platform with a few other people as the car bumped to a stop. The ground operator unhooked the latch and slid the doors open. The car was large enough for a dozen people. A metal handrail encircled the inside. There was a storage rack attached to the inner roof of the car. Have a good run, the operator commented pleasantly to the group as he reclosed the doors. When the latch clanged shut, Cody felt the same strange chill he had experienced earlier. And then with a loud hum, the car began its ascent high up the face of Sugardome. Cody studied the other passengers. To his left was an elderly couple in matching blue ski jackets. A woman with a large blonde ponytail and tangerine-colored jumpsuit was talking to an odd-looking man who had a cast on his right wrist. That guy gave Cody the creeps, though. Cody glanced to his right, and he met the gaze of a dark-haired girl about his own age. She was with a man and woman who were most likely her parents. They must be on vacation, Cody thought, smiling shyly at the girl. Boom! A loud noise sounded from somewhere above them. What was that? The girl with the ponytail cried in alarm. Before anyone could answer, there was a grinding sound, and the car lurched back, swinging from side to side. One more bump, and Cody sent hurtling across the car. His head slammed into the handrail, and everything went dark. When Cody came to, everything was still dark. It took him a moment to realize a large blanket had fallen from the rack above his head and covered him. Pushing it aside, he sat up and looked around. The empty car was stopped at the mountaintop station with its doors open. Well, thanks a lot for leaving me here, folks, he muttered to himself. Rubbing the spot where he hit his head, Cody gathered up his equipment and stepped out of the car. The platform was empty. I guess the others were in a hurry to get out and didn't see me in there, he thought. Cody stepped into his skis and glided across the packed snow next to a man getting ready to start down the hill. It looks great, doesn't it? Cody observed. The man took off without saying a word. Cody made a face. Setting his own poles, he pushed down until he felt his skis sliding forward. The crisp air felt wonderful as he picked up speed. By skiing to an uncrowded rope lift about midway down the slope, Cody was able to ride up and ski down several times. He was enjoying himself so much he forgot all about the dull throbbing in his head. Cody was heading across the hill when a patch of orange in the trees caught his eyes. Crunching the edges of his skis in the snow, he stopped. A figure in a bright tangerine-colored jumpsuit was standing half hidden in the undergrowth at the edge of the run. It was a woman with a blonde ponytail. She was staring right at him. She had some kind of dirt, or maybe a huge dark bruise on one side of her face. The glare from the sunlight made it hard to see into the shadows. He skied in a little closer. What in the... Cody looked this way and that, but he saw nothing but pine trees. The woman was gone, vanished. He turned back toward the run and almost bumped into a man standing beside him. A broken cast hung from the fellow's right wrist, and he held his head at an odd, tilted angle. The man opened his mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. In frustration, he reached out and gripped one of Cody's ski poles. Hey, let go! Were you nuts? Cody yelled. He yanked the pole away and took off down the hill. Upset by the man's strange behavior, Cody stuck to the middle of the slope. He decided not to make another run. When he got to the bottom, hey, thanks, Tracy, he called out to his friend as he set the borrowed equipment against the wall in the rental shack. Engrossed in what appeared to be a serious conversation on the house phone, Cody's friend Tracy didn't even look in his direction. Oh, my God, Tracy said into the receiver. When did it happen? Does anybody know who was in it? When did what happen? Cody wondered as he shuffled back outside. The day was becoming overcast and breeze had turned icy. The interaction with the bizarre guy had made him nervous. He jingled some quarters in his pocket and walked toward the video arcade. Inside, the noise and crowd made him feel a little bit better. Taking up a place at one of his favorite games, Invasion Force from Alpha 5, he dropped a quarter in the slot. Yes, he exclaimed when he had downed the last alien spacecraft. Then something drew his attention from the game. The dark-haired girl from the cable car was leaning against the far wall, watching his every move. The commotion of the arcade faded to a soft buzz. It was almost as if everyone else in the room was dissolving away. All they could see was the dark-haired girl's coal-black eyes. What's going on? Cody said aloud. He closed his eyes and opened them again. The girl was gone. Cody gasped in disbelief, but she had simply vanished. Confused and frightened, Cody tried to refocus on the game, but when he shifted his gaze, his heart leapt with terror. Standing behind him, reflected on the glass screen, was the scowling face of the man in the cast. Stunned, Cody saw the image reach out toward him. In panic, he dodged the outstretched fingers and bolted for the door. Once outside, he raced toward the main hall entrance and skidded to a halt. The elderly couple he had first seen on the tramway stood glaring down at him from a huge window wall. Their blue jackets were stained with dark red blood. Turning on his heels, Cody dashed along the now slushy path, splattering clumps of wet snow as he ran. "Tracy! Tracy!" he gasped out as he burst through the doorway of the rental shack. "Tracy, I don't know what's going on, but I need your help, man." But the young man ignored his friend Cody. "Oh, I can't believe it," Tracy said softly to another man who was leaning against the counter. "Geez, he was in here only a couple hours ago." "Tracy!" Cody screamed. "He can't hear you." Cody snapped his head up to see the man with the cast standing in the open doorway. One by one, the other passengers stepped into the shadowy room. Cody looked from one to the other. "We can't leave without you, boy," the man whispered. The boy cringed and covered his eyes. No, I don't believe you. No, I'm going to open my eyes. You'll all be gone. This isn't really happening." As he spoke, Cody felt the ground grow cold. He opened his eyes and he found that he was kneeling in the snow near a pile of twisted metal and broken glass that had once been a cable car. High above snapped a cable twisted in the wind. Painfully, he watched as a stretcher was loaded into a special ambulance. The small body on the stretcher was completely covered with heavy plastic material. "Man, it's so heartbreaking, isn't it?" a nearby paramedic noted sadly. "I know this kid's parents, too. Yeah, they probably think he's in school." Backing away, Cody sensed that the others were near him. He looked up into the eyes of the man he'd been so afraid of, but all fear was gone now. "It's time to leave, Cody," the man said simply. Another cable car slowly appeared. The doors slid silently open. Cody watched the ambulance pull away and then stepped into the car. The doors closed, and the car faded into the gathering mist. Ooh, Nightmare on Sugar Dome. Yeah, me either. So, our next one up. Oh, and just a reminder, we'll be running till 8 o'clock with our stories, and then we'll take a break, and at 9 o'clock. Psycho! So, the PACT. The old woman rocked back and forth in her chair. Her eyes were not on the three little girls sitting at her feet, but rather her eyes were on the dirt road that led toward the swamp. "It devours the snakes and the hates the gators. Oh," the old woman was saying with her distinctive Cajun accent. "And if you're brave enough and stay and listen, you can hear its victims' bones a snapping like the dried sticks," the old woman continued on. "But Lakota, Lakota prefers a meal of tasty human flesh. Shar turned to look toward the tops of the giant cypress trees that soared upward from the Louisiana bottomland. She knew that there were plenty of deer, wild turkeys, even a black bear or two out there. But according to legend, it was also the home of the gruesome man lizard, Lakota, that her grandmother was talking about. "Make the noise it makes again, Gran," she begged. Char's grandmother pursed her lips and made a strange hissing noise. Then followed up by clicking her tongue against the back of her teeth. Char and her friends Jennifer and Jamie each tried to imitate the sound, but they couldn't get it quite right. Me either. That is the sound of Lakota breathing in the dark between his dagger-like fangs, yes. It is the sound of his razor-edged scales snapping against one another as he slithers in search of the prey. If you was unlucky enough to hear that," the old woman warned, "Lakota is already close enough to have picked up your scent. Few people have ever been able to escape when Lakota is that near." The girls cringed in fear and delight. "Mama!" Char's mother stood in the open screen door with a scowl on her face. "Don't you be scaring these babies with your silly tales." She turned to Jennifer and Jamie and smiled. "Come on, girls. I promised your folks I'd drive you back to the base in time for dinner." Now in bed that night, Jamie strained to hear the sound of the swamp through her open window. Her dad was a career military officer, so even though she was only 7 years old, she had already lived in several different places. But this one was her favorite. Jennifer and Char were her best friends ever. Jennifer's parents were also in the military, but Charlotte was the local. She was from a Cajun family that lived on the bayou since the 18th century. A lot of people have a good friend named Charlotte. And this Charlotte knew a lot about the swamp, and she had shown Jennifer and Jamie some great stuff, like the best place to search for tadpoles and crayfish and how to spot a raccoon's nest. The girls called themselves the Three Musketeers. They even had a secret hiding place, a clearing about a half-mile into the swamp where they would eat picnic lunches. Jamie wished she could stay in Louisiana forever. That was why the news she heard the following Saturday morning, that they were moving again, was so disheartening. "Oh, you make new friends, hon," her mother soothed. "And you can write to Jennifer and Char. Besides, I'm sure you'll like California." "Oh, I know, Mama," Jamie said sadly. It wasn't her parents' fault that they had to move. There had been many changes on the base recently. Her dad said it was being downsized, and a lot of people are being transferred. In fact, later that day, Jamie learned that Jennifer, too, would be leaving. Only Char would be left behind. The three girls sat sullenly in their secret meeting place, watching dragonflies buzz at the surface water of the water. "You think we'll ever see each other again?" Jennifer finally asked, with a sigh. "Well, of course we will," Char said sharply. "If you want something badly enough, like for Kim Starr to come to the story, then you can make it happen no matter what. No matter what." She looked from one girl to the other. "But why don't we make sure?" "How can we make sure?" Jamie questioned. Char waded out into the muddy water and snapped 3 sharp spines from the trunk of a water locust tree. "Why, we'll make a pact," she announced solemnly. "A blood pact." And with that, she poked the tip of one spine into her finger. A drop of bright red blood welled up. "Exactly 5 years from today, we'll meet in this exact spot. No matter what," she continued, allowing the drop of blood to fall to the ground. As it seeped in, she handed Jamie and Jennifer each a spine. They each did as Char had done. "Then it's all settled," Char said. "Friends forever, yeah? Nothing will stop us from being together on that day. 5 years from now, right here." "Friends forever," the others responded. And so, 5 years later, standing on the back porch of her new home and looking out at the tops of the giant cypress trees, Jamie remembered the day that she and her friends had made their sworn pact as if it had only been yesterday. It was as though fate had been working to help the three girls keep their promise. Her dad had not expected the transfer back to Louisiana. But here they were, and only 1 week before the appointed time. Jamie wondered if Jennifer and Char would be there too. At first, the girls kept in touch with each other, writing regularly as they do. But after a while, though, the letters had become fewer and farther between. In fact, it had been almost a year since she had heard from either of her friends. "Jamie?" a voice said softly. Jamie turned to see Jennifer framed in the doorway. "I can't believe you're really here," Jennifer cried, running to her friend. The girls laughed and hugged each other. "My mom told me that your family had been transferred too," Jamie said. "How long have you been here? Have you seen Char?" I've been here about a week," Jennifer answered. "But Char isn't here. I guess you didn't hear about the accident, huh?" "Accident? What accident?" "Well, it happened about a year ago, I guess. Char's mom and grandmother were killed in a car accident. She was sent to live with a relative, a cousin, I think, in New York." "Oh, I'm so sorry," Jamie said mournfully, remembering how kind Char's family had been to her. "Well, there's some good people in New York, I guess. Oh, I'll miss them. Do you think Char is okay?" Jennifer shrugged. "It's been a long time, but maybe she'll be able to come back to meet us, you think?" Suddenly her face brightened. "I have an idea. Mrs. Willis is still at the post office. She would know how to reach Char. We could get an address where we could write to her and let her know we're back. We still have a week to go. Maybe she could get here. She said nothing would stop her. Remember?" "Fantastic," Jamie agreed. "I have to go to the post office with my mom today. I can write the letter and mail it." "Write A letter. I don't really know what that means, but must have something to do like old-fashioned email stuff or something. I'm not sure. Anyway, the time finally came to fulfill their pact. Jamie glanced at her watch and then back at the picnic basket she and Jennifer had prepared before making their way to the special clearing. There was a chill in the air, and a light mist rose from the sun-warmed water. In the distance, a few bullfrogs were practicing their evening chorus. Finally, Jamie spoke. Look, we don't know if the letter even got there, Jen. I'm sure Char would have been here if she could. She rose to her feet and put a hand on Jennifer's shoulder. But we shouldn't stay any longer. It'll be dusk soon. We haven't been out here in ages, you know. I don't think I could find my way back in the dark without Char. Jennifer smiled. Yeah, and we wouldn't want to be stuck in this part of the swamp alone. Remember old Cody? And then tried to imitate the funny hissing and clicking noise that Graham had made so convincingly and still eluded the girls. Jamie noticed the shadows lengthening on the ground as the sun crept closer. You still can't do that very well. Me either, she said, laughing as she bent down to pick up a basket. And then a soft sound broke the surrounding hush. It made Jamie stop laughing. It actually made her shudder. Jamie straightened up and looked at her friend. Wow, I'm really impressed. That was much better. That was so real. But Jennifer was staring out over the swamp toward a shadowy grove of white oak and bald cypress trees. Lacy strands of Spanish moss hung from the branches and dangled into the water like cobwebs. That wasn't me, Jennifer said with a tremor in her voice. Oh, come on, Jamie began. But she stopped when she saw the look on her companion's face. Let's get back. Now. The girls walked in silence for a few hundred yards. Then the mist was getting strangely thick and warm. Then suddenly they go no further. A tall stand of vegetation that looked like feathery bamboo blocked their path. Canebrake, Jamie muttered to Jennifer. We must have made a wrong turn. I don't think we should try to work our way around it. In this mist, I can't tell how far it goes. Before they could take another step, the strange hissing noise echoed over the water once again. Followed by a series of clicks. It was closer than it had ever been before. It's Lakoti, Jennifer moaned in terror. He's picked up our scent. Oh, don't be ridiculous, Jamie encountered. She couldn't stop her hands from shaking, though. It's a gator. Lakoti, it's just... But she didn't finish. Everything was eerily quiet. Even the bullfrogs had stopped croaking now. Through the haze, she could barely make out a dark shadow rising from the swamp. And it wasn't the great pumpkin. The girls backed toward the canebrake as the form loomed closer, then seemed to disappear. The sound of something moving in the water broke the stillness, something very big. The air smelled foul, and Jamie found it impossible to breathe. Don't move at all, she whispered to Jennifer. Maybe it will... Both girls screamed in horror as a huge creature leapt at them in a surge of foaming swamp water. At least 10 feet tall, it leered down at them with gleaming yellow eyes. Clumps of slime hung from its long, sickle-shaped claws. Run! Run! Jamie shouted, pushing Jennifer ahead of her. Both girls sprinted in the direction from which they had come. Tripping over a protruding root, Jamie fell hard to the ground, and the beast was close behind her. Howling in anger, its huge mouth was lined with dripping fangs, and its long, forked tongue whipped around as it roared. It was almost on her. Get up! Get up! She heard Jennifer shriek. Then suddenly she felt someone tugging at her arm. Scrambling to her feet, Jamie charged after her friend. Crashing into the clearing, the girls searched their surroundings from side to side in despair. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to run, Jennifer cried. This way, someone yelled. The two girls snapped their attention to a small rise and saw Char, motioning them on. There's no time. Hurry! Char shouted. In panic, the three girls clambered up the side of the small hillock toward their friend and tumbled down the other side. The soggy ground shook beneath their feet as the bloodthirsty monster galloped after them. Their friend Char darted toward a tall strand of swamp red maple. The trees grew closer together, and their gnarled roots and buttresses stuck out at all angles like knobby knees. Lakoti's too big to follow us in here, Char gasped. Up to their hips in dark, murky pool, the girls held their breaths and pressed themselves against the gray-green trunks. "Duck down as far as you can into the water," Shar instructed them. "That way Lakota won't be able to pick up our scent." The girls did as they were ordered. Jamie felt her feet sinking in the muck. Something slick slithered along her leg as she fought the impulse to scream. All at once, the nightmarish beast sloshed into view. Tiny waves splashed against her face and stung her eyes, but Jamie could still see the creature swinging this way and that. It was so close she could smell the stench of its fetid breath. Then, to her surprise, the Lakota bellowed in rage and headed deeper into the swamp. Shar made a silent sign to the others not to move. As the thrashing of the creature faded away, she motioned for her friends to follow her. Without a word, the three girls made their way out of the hellish swamp as quickly as their feet could carry them. Once back on the road toward the base, the shivering girls hugged each other in relief. How did you, when? Jamie and Jennifer just stammered together at Shar with their trembling lips. "I said nothing would stop me from being here," Shar smiled. "I couldn't let you two city kids fend for yourselves out in the swamps." Jennifer shook her head. "Oh, I never really thought that Lakota existed, you know. I still can't believe that this happened. We've got to tell somebody to warn them." Shar shook her head. "Nah, the people who live on the swamp know deep in their hearts the legends are true. The others will, you will never convince them no matter what you say." They took Jennifer's and Jamie's hands in her own. "You are my very, very best friends," Shar continued. "The important thing is that you made it. No one else ever has to know what happened here." Jamie nodded. "You're right. This will be our secret. We can talk about it more tomorrow. Right now, I'd like to go home and get out of these wet clothes." "Friends forever?" Shar asked. "Friends forever," Jamie and Jennifer answered. At home, Jamie slipped off her soggy shoes and snuck quietly in through the kitchen door. She was sure she would never be able to give her parents a believable explanation about why she was soaked to the bone, so tiptoeing through the front hall, she noticed a letter addressed to her on the hall table. It had Shar's return address in New York on it. Jamie picked up the envelope and padded to her room. She slipped out of her wet clothes into a bathrobe, then she pulled out the letter. "I guess Charlotte wanted to let us know she was coming," she thought, tearing the letter open. Then Jamie read a line or two, then drew in her breath sharply. The envelope slipped to the floor. The letter was not from Charlotte, but from Charlotte's cousin. It was short and matter-of-fact. Jamie stared at the last lines. "The accident occurred 3 months ago. It was such a terrible shock so soon after the similar deaths of her mother and grandmother. If it is any comfort, Charlotte was killed instantly and certainly did not suffer. If there's anything else..." The letter continued on, but Jamie could no longer read through her tears. Charlotte had truly meant it when she had said nothing would stop her from being there on the appointed day. Not even the grave. "Oh, yes, Charlotte," Jamie sobbed. "Friends forever." The Pact. Hello, Kim. Good to see you. And DJ. Welcome, welcome. Who else joined us? Arya was with us. So, anybody that joined, I didn't already say hello to. Hello. Ah, there's a Muggins there, I think. So, our next story. Better carry on here. We got lots of stories, and we have so much time and so little to do. No, wait. Strike that. Reverse it. Camp Colby. Jake stood grinning in the warm, early morning sunshine. Jake really liked the first day of camp, and he really liked Camp Colby. Hello, Silver Moon. This would be his second summer here. Nestled on the shores of Crystal Clear Lake, high in the Sierra Nevada mountains, Camp Colby had everything. There was horseback riding, boating, sailing, hiking, plenty of other activities. Jake wanted to do everything. "Hey, Jake!" He turned around and squinted at somebody running in his direction. "Eli!" Jake shouted back, recognizing his friend and the bunkmate from the year before. Eli skidded to a stop on the gravel path. "Did you just get here? Wait till you see the new boat dock. What cabin are you in?" Red Wing," Jake answered. "Wow, you're kidding. Me too. It's a really cool cabin." Eli grabbed on enthusiastically about how much they were going to have, how much fun they're going to have, about a horse he hoped and they'd let him ride, and about some of the guys he'd already met. There's a kid named Adam whose dad is in the astronaut program. Can you believe it? He said, hardly taking a breath. Come on, I'll introduce you around. Jake followed his chattering friend Eli up the steep path to the woodland cabin. It was as cool as Eli had said it was. It had a raised porch in front with a rough string hammock tied between two posts. Inside were 6 comfortable bunks and plenty of room for everyone's gear. One by one, his bunkmates, Adam, Charles, and Scott, introduced themselves to Jake. And I'm Tim, a slightly deeper voice boomed from behind Jake. Jake turned around to see a tall teenage boy leaning against the open doorway. I'll be your counselor, Tim said with a pleasant smile. Now, if everyone's put their things away, we have to go down to the cafeteria for orientation. Come on, guys, let's get it over with so you can really start having some fun, huh? Come on. Once all the kids were seated at the rows of long wooden tables, Mr. Ames, Roy C. Ames to be exact, the camp director, explained the camp rules. Jake happily recalled that there weren't very many rules at all. Most were just for safety's sake. And finally, Mr. Ames pronounced, those of you who have been here before know that this was once a mining area. It's been a very long time since the mine has been worked, and it's quite deserted. Still, the entrance to the mine shaft is open. It can be very dangerous. I don't want any of you to go anywhere near it. You understand me? Jake noticed that Tim stiffened a little and looked strangely uncomfortable while Mr. Ames was talking. Am I clear, everyone? That area is off limits. Anywhere near, though, you go home immediately, he said sternly, then smiled and changed his tone. Hey, okay, now, boys, let me end by saying, welcome to Camp COLBY. Woo! A general cheer sounded. That evening, the kids from Red Wing and 2 other cabins gathered around a shared campfire. A full moon sailed overhead. One of the camp cooks, a grizzly old fellow named Badger, had brought up a supply of hot dogs and marshmallows. Hot dogs, marshmallows, pizza. Oh, what else can you ask for? He invited himself to join in the cookout and entertain the boys with funny stories that he made up as he went along. Hey, can you make up ghost stories too? Charles asked, placing his 3rd hot dog on the end of his roasting stick. Badger was strangely silent for a moment, then smiled from his withered old face. Boys, I don't have to make up ghost stories. I knows things that happen up here. True things that would send shivers up your spine. Well, Adam coaxed, like what? There was another long pause. Only the sound of the crackling fire broke the stillness. Well, like that mine, Badger rasped and pointed to the black-top mountaintop silhouetted against the moonlit sky. 100 years ago, it was turning out enough silver to make everyone involved with it very wealthy. Yeah, but it was tough mine to work, so the owners paid top dollar to attract the toughest miners. He raised one eyebrow and looked from listener to listener. They were a rough and rowdy lot, real troublemakers, you know. But they was good miners, nevertheless. There were plenty of brawls, but the men stuck together. Anyway, the owners may have paid well, but they skimped in another way. They were more concerned with relieving the mine of its silver ore than they were with the safety of the men, you get me? Everyone knew it would happen. Yeah, and it finally did. Everyone knew what would happen, Eli whispered. I'm getting to that. One day old Mother Earth just couldn't take no more poking and digging about, you know. You could hear the main shaft groaning all the way into town. Then part of it just collapsed. Crash! No one working the east tunnel made it out. There were more than 24 men down there. Yeah, some people claim that for days afterwards you could hear the sound of their cries from somewhere deep in the belly of that mine. Badger leaned in close to the wide-eyed boys. Some people say that on a still night like tonight, if you listen real hard, you can still hear the victims of the disaster moaning to be set free. Wow, Jake gasped. Didn't anybody try to help them? No. The harsh sound of Tim's voice startled the kids. Jake turned to see his counselor sitting a few feet from the fire. The flickering of the flames cast an eerie shadow across Tim's face as he spoke. No, nobody tried to help them. They just left them there. They said it was impossible to reach them, is what they said. I suppose if that vein of silver had been running out, they might have found a way, huh? But no, they didn't. They didn't even try. Eli stared out into the night toward the abandoned mine. As if on cue, a coyote howled in the distance. Have you ever heard them moaning? He asked Badger. Tim interrupted. No one's heard them moaning. It's just the sound of the wind in the empty tunnels, boys. Tim seemed to be in a better mood now. He gave Badger a stony look. But the dangers are very real, not supernatural. That night, as the boys and Red Wing prepared for bed, Scott asked Tim how he knew so much about the mine and why he seemed so angry about it. Yeah, I hate to admit it, the older boy said, but last year I decided to find out about that mine for myself. So I did a little exploring. Okay, well, you can't tell Mr. Ames, okay? Well, I think he knows anyway, but anyway, I got lost. I couldn't find the main entrance. It was just pure luck. I found me another way out. Weren't you scared? Adam questioned. Oh, sure I was scared. The wind really howls up there. But it's just the wind, guys. That's all. I got a few bumps and bruises. Everything turned out okay. But, being there in that mine all alone made me really curious about what happened to the miners. So afterward, I read up on the disaster. It was a terrible thing for those men to have been deserted the way they were. They must have died horribly. Now I get angry just thinking about it. A dark look crept over Tim's face for a moment, then disappeared. Look, I'll tell you what. Tomorrow we can all go for a hike up the mountain. I'll show you the main entrance. Charles shook his head. Well, couldn't we all get in trouble for that? Don't worry, Tim assured him. We'll just take a look and come back. I mean, you're curious, right? You might as well go with me. You'll be with me, and I guess that mine, I know that mine better than anybody. Well, sure, Jake agreed. What could happen? Yeah, what could happen? But Tim figured if he didn't take the boys up there, they'd make a beeline for it first thing, so it was better to be with him. The following morning had dawned drab and overcast. During the first part of the hike, the sun had vainly tried to break through, but now it was only a dull disk behind a curtain of clouds. A crisp wind had picked up, too, and the tops of the tallest pines were nodding up and down. Sky's really dark over there, Eli pointed to the west. Looks like a storm's heading this way. You think maybe we should go back? No, Tim said confidently and kept walking. It'll probably just blow over. Happens all the time up here in the summer. We're almost to the mine anyway. Let's keep going. Within a few minutes, heavy drops of rain began to splatter on the trail and around them. Jake pulled a worn baseball cap out of his back pocket and slipped it on his head. I think Eli's right. We don't want to get caught out here in the storm. As if in agreement, the sky lit up slightly and followed by an ominous roll of thunder. Come on, guys. If we turn back now, we might make it to camp before it hits. But nature had something else in mind. All at once, a blazing flash of lightning sizzled directly overhead, and a clap of thunder boomed like a cannon, and the rain escalated to a virtual downpour. Oh, great! Now what? Charles shouted above the fury. We have to take cover, boys. Come on, Tim answered, trying to sound calm. He looked around. The closest place is the mine, guys. Come on, we'll be safe there. The soil was rapidly turning to thick mud as rivulets of rushing water cascaded down the trail. The boys struggled to follow their counselor. Through the deluge, the opening of the mine loomed into the view. It was black as coal and seemed to scar the hillside. What? In there? Scott hollered as the water streamed down his face. You want us to go in there? It's the safest place, Tim barked back. I'm going in. Come on. Another bolt of lightning convinced everyone else to follow. Jake pulled out his flashlight and looked around at the tunnel. Geez, it's creepy in here. At least it is kind of dry. Huh! Scott jumped. Did you hear that? What? Charles muttered. I didn't hear anything. Wait, Jake cautioned. Scott's right. Listen. Listen. There was a slight rumbling sound overhead. It was getting louder. Get back, Jake bellowed. The unstable rain-sodden dirt and rock over the mine entrance gave way. The boys leaped away from the opening just in time before tons of debris piled up, trapping them inside. When the movement stopped, Jake shined his light on the entrance. The boulders were far too big to move. The boys simply gazed at it, dumbfounded. "Huh, what are we going to do now?" Adam whispered. "Nobody even knows we're up here. We're never going to get out." A second flashlight beam flared to life. It was Tim's. "Don't worry, guys," he said calmly. "Remember what I told you. I've been here before. I know another way out. We just have to follow the old minecart tracks. Come on." Something told me this was a bad idea. I think it was Flossie. He pointed the beam from his flashlight at a pair of iron rails that had been used to move the mining cars loaded with ore. The boys started to follow when an unearthly moan sounded from somewhere deep in the tunnel. "What was that?" Scott said with a shudder. "It's the wind," Tim assured him. "Come on now. Let's go, guys. Come on." The tunnel was littered with fallen boulders and timbers that had once been used to shore it up. The boys had to pick their way along slowly and carefully. Their only weapon against the oily blackness came from the two slim flashlight beams. Their only leads were the two slender, rusted rails. It seemed they'd walked for nearly half an hour when suddenly the rails disappeared too. In the circle of light, they could see that this part of the tunnel was partially flooded. The tracks vanished into the stagnant water. "It's a natural ditch," Tim explained. "It must have gotten flooded since I was here, but it isn't very wide. The tracks are supported by a trellis. Come on." Tim stopped as he noticed the worried faces of the campers. "The only way across, guys, is to walk on the rails. They must be just below the surface." The boys were silent. "Look, guys, we don't have a choice. I'll go first. Come on." I don't want to do this," Scott wailed. His whole body was shaking. Jake put the flashlight in the terrified boy's hands. "We have to," Jake said. He soothed, trying to keep his voice steady. "Here, Scott, you take the light. It'll make you feel better." Once again, a mournful groan filled the tunnel. "It's just the timbers," Tim said firmly. "Let's go." He stepped out of the slippery rail and started out into the water. One at a time, each boy followed. Jake was last, behind Scott. They were only a few feet out when Scott began to wobble. "There's something in the water. I felt something. It's got my ankle. Ah!" Screaming, he lurched forward into Charles. Both boys toppled into the murky water. Jake watched in horror as they seemed to be sucked under by some force. The flashlight glowed underwater just long enough for Jake to be certain that he saw 3 flailing figures, not 2. Then it went out and the splashing stopped. "Do something," he yelled at Tim. "We gotta help them." "Sorry, there's nothing we can do," Tim said, almost without feeling. "Keep going, guys. Come on. It's your only chance." Slipping and sliding, the youngsters sloshed forward. Well, we made it. We made it," Adam wheezed as they tumbled onto the soggy tunnel floor on the opposite side of the ghastly pool. "Don't stop now," Tim ordered. Eli stayed on the ground. "What about Scott and Charles?" "We can't help them. We got to save ourselves now," the older boy snapped. Tim started down the tunnel. Reluctantly, Adam followed, then Jake. Eli was close behind. To keep from going crazy with fear, Jake listened to the steady crunch of Eli's footsteps in the gravelly soil. We'll get out, he said to himself over and over. And then he realized he no longer heard footsteps behind him. "Eli?" Jake called out. No answer. Jake turned and called out again, louder. "Eli!" But his friend was gone. Jake twisted back to see the glow of Tim's flashlight disappear up ahead. He raced after him. Out of breath, he reeled around the corner into a wide chamber. From somewhere high above, an opening was letting in just enough daylight so that Jake could see they were no longer alone. At least 24 wispy figures stood staring at them. "Who? What are they?" murmured Adam. He was pressed up against the chamber wall. Some had horrible gashes all over their ghostly bodies. They looked like wounds that might have been suffered as an aging, unsafe tunnel crumbled in on them, crushing their frail human forms. Others were almost unmarked. The remnants of tattered flesh on their hands, however, was probably the result of uselessly trying to dig a way out of their grave a century before. Somehow, some hideous part of them had remained. "What's the matter, Jake? Cat got your tongue?" Scott stepped out from behind an outcrop of rock. Charles, too, stepped forward. Both the boys who had toppled into the water back in the tunnel were now standing before him. Another voice added, Don't tell me you aren't glad to see your dear friends, eh? E- Eli? Jake whispered. You might say that, Eli answered. He ran his hand over his own chest. At least this is Eli's body. Oh, yeah, it feels so good to be warm again. Jake turned his gaze to Tim, who stood smiling down from a ledge leading to the opening above. Tim, what's happening? The older boy peered coldly at Jake and Adam and scowled. Yeah, Tim, right, Tim. It was so fortunate your Tim wandered in here last year. His body's been so useful. You see, it is the only way we can get out. We need, vehicles, so to speak. Bodies, to be more accurate. Tim was the first, and now with this body we can draw others here just as we did with you. Soon we'll all be free of this horrible pit. The phantoms approach as Adams and Jake screams fill the dark, dank tunnels. Tim started to laugh. Goodbye for now, boys. Then he motioned to Eli, Scott, and Charles. Together, the phony counselor, his new cohort, scrambled up out of the opening onto a trail leading back toward camp. The rain had stopped, and each of the beings gulped in deep breaths of sweet air. Moments later, what had once been Adam and Jake joined them. They looked at each other with knowing smiles, and they all started back toward Camp Colby to recruit more boys for the next day's hike. Ooh, Camp Colby. I think I'd rather be soggy in the rain outside also. Okay. So, top of the hour, so I guess we're done for the... Oh, wait, this is only the middle of this hour, as it were. So, on to the next story. Since you're all still here with me and haven't disappeared yet, wish fulfillment. Greg was the only fifth grader who didn't like his teacher, Mrs. Reed. Yeah, but then Greg didn't seem to really like anyone. He thought her classes were too boring, and he didn't hesitate to mention that to anyone who would listen. Even when the teacher arranged special events, such as a visit by a real astronaut during a class on the solar system, Greg criticized that idea. And now that the mummy and certain belongings of the great Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun were on tour, the class was scheduled to go on a field trip to the local natural history museum. All the students were excited about the trip. Well, almost all the students. Greg started complaining as soon as the class began to board the bus. It would take them into town. This is so dumb, he mumbled to Maria, the girl unfortunate enough to sit next to him. Who wants to see an old dead guy? Maria scowled. I do, for one, Greg. King Tut was one of the most famous people who ever lived. When he was our age, he ruled the whole country. I think this is exciting. Greg waved his hand. That's not such a big deal. When I grow up, I'm going to be famous too. Oh, yeah? Benny Taylor twisted in his seat to look back at Greg. What are you going to do to become famous? Talk everyone to death, Greg? I've got a plan, Greg lied. I haven't absolutely decided yet, but there are lots of things I could do. Maybe I'll be a race car driver. He looked at his companions to see if they were impressed. No one was. Yeah, but not just any old race car driver, Greg continued. One of those daredevils like that guy that jumped over the Grand Canyon. Nobody jumped over the Grand Canyon, Benny snorted. Greg crossed his arms and smiled smugly. Then I'll be the first one. You'll see. Someday, everyone will know who I am. Betty and Maria both laughed as the rumbling of the bus engine grew louder and the vehicle carefully turned out of the parking lot onto the main road. Now, Greg might not be very enthusiastic about visiting the museum, but he was pleased to miss a day of school. And who wouldn't be? He really didn't see the point of learning history and geography. Those kids that work so hard and always turn in their homework and stuff are dumb. There's an easier way, Greg thought to himself. The drive to the city took less than an hour. During that time, Mrs. Reed explained to the children the museum was fairly large, so it was important that they all stick together. She informed them of the rules, and they would be expected to follow, such as being as quiet as possible and not touching any of the objects. Finally, she passed out a map of the museum to each student. The room that held the Egyptian exhibit was marked with a large X. Soon the yellow school bus pulled slowly into the parking lot in front of the City Museum. Talking and laughing, the children filed out of the bus and gathered at the entrance to the building. Near the door, a beautiful fountain spouted a glistening stream of water into the air. The morning sun created a breathtaking rainbow that quivered with delicate spray. Yeah, but Greg barely noticed that. He simply whined about how hot it was standing in the sun. "Are they ever going to let us go inside?" Greg griped. Once inside the huge air-conditioned lobby, he continued to protest. "Oh, this is going to take forever. When are we supposed to stop for lunch? This is so boring." Finally, Maria had had enough. "Look, Greg," she said angrily, "if you're going to do nothing but complain, you're going to ruin it for everyone else. Why don't you just keep your comments to yourself?" She walked off to join the rest of the group. Greg watched her go. He hated it when someone told him to be quiet. "Yeah, go ahead, jerk. I didn't want to come anyway." The other students turned a corner, and Greg slowed down enough to find himself alone. He had decided to explore on his own when Mrs. Reed peeked back around the corner. "Gregory, please stay with us. I don't want to have to worry about you." Grudgingly, Greg trailed along as the group passed a display of early American Indian art. As he reached out to feel a large woven basket, nearby guard spoke up. "Please don't touch this, son. It's very old." "So what?" Greg responded and looked defiantly in the man's eyes. The guard was obviously irritated with Greg's lack of respect. "Why don't you just stay with your teacher, kid? You might get into trouble roaming around here on your own. And don't touch anything." Greg was about to say something in return, but thought better of it. He sauntered away, unsure which direction his group had gone. He turned back to ask the guard, but found himself completely alone now. The marbled hall was curiously quiet. Dark-toned paintings in gilded frames lined the walls. From every direction, painted eyes stared at him. He thought he saw a tiny monkey scurry by, but couldn't be sure. Greg could feel the gaze of the eyes, though, and it made him uneasy. He headed toward the far end of the hall. Moments later, he found himself before a grand archway marked "The Tools of Ancient Magic." Carefully, he pulled a crumpled map of the museum from his pocket to see how far it was from the Egyptian room. Is that a Dagmar? I think there's a Dagmar. Hello, Dagmar. Oddly, the tools of ancient magic did not appear on the map. Still, it sounded a lot more interesting than hanging around gaping at a moldy old mummy, he meant. So Greg stepped through the arch and found himself in a spacious room. The light was mainly provided by small spotlights over the displays. Against each wall was a tall glass case presenting unusual objects made of wood, rock, or bone and decorated with beads, feathers, and shells. One sign identified a large carved bone as an object for casting out evil spirits that cause mental illness. A small crystal was labeled as a charm that would protect the wearer from poison. But Greg was drawn to a lone exhibit spotlighted in the center of the room. It was a huge, rough rock at least 10 feet tall. Some long-forgotten person had carved it to look like a human face with long earlobes and jutting jaw. The rock was surrounded by velvet ropes. A sign stood nearby requesting that visitors not touch the display. For a moment, Greg stood in front of the sign. Then he smiled and reached out to run his fingertips over the stone. It was surprisingly warm and soft, almost like human flesh. He trailed his fingers along the side of the wide, silent mouth. "Ow!" he cried. As he snatched his hand back from the rock, something sharp had pricked Greg's finger, and a tiny drop of blood glistened at the corner of the statue's lips. Looking around to be sure that he was alone, Greg reached out to rub the drop away, but he only caused it to smear. Then he felt the stone grow warmer. The air around him seemed to hum. Greg's heart raced. He quickly whirled and dashed for the door, but it was gone. Turning completely around, he saw there was no exit, just 4 smooth, solid walls. He threw himself against the place where the door had been, but he didn't budge. Hey! What's going on here?" The terrified boy pounded the wall with a closed fist. "What do you want?" a deep voice echoed behind him. Greg froze. Fearfully, he turned to see the shadowy figure standing near the statue. "I asked, what do you want?" The voice repeated. "Why did you call me?" "I didn't call you." A dark bloodstain glittered on the stone. "You did." "Oh, I'm sorry." Greg was trembling. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to get out."
"Right. Let's get it over with."
The figure interrupted. It's bad enough that I must use my powers for the benefit of worthless humans. I don't need to listen to your meaningless babble as well. As frightened as he was, Greg bristled at the insult. Who's worthless? Who do you think you are? I know precisely who I am, the being answered. I am a genie of the most ancient realm. Greg's amazement and curiosity overpowered his fear. A genie? You mean like from a bottle? The genie seemed very annoyed. Yeah, something like that. What do you want, boy? Oh, so you have to grant wishes, don't you? Greg's terror had turned to pleasure. This was it. He had always known something like this was going to happen to him. The genie sneered. Seems you've done a little reading, boy. I'm overwhelmed by this display of intelligence. Greg was losing his temper. I wish you'd stop being so mean and just give me an answer. The light dimmed. For a second, the surroundings grew hazy and then became crystal clear. Yes, the genie said smugly. I must grant you 3 wishes. 1 down, 2 to go. But be careful. Fortune sees to it that no one gets any more than they deserve. You tricked me out of 1 wish, Greg frowned. But I'm too smart for you. I know exactly what I want, and now you have to grant my wishes. He stood proudly with his hands on his hips. I want to be the richest boy who ever lived, and I want to be famous. One of the most famous people in all the world. Once again, the room dimmed. Details swirled into an indistinct pool of color and shadow. When things became clear again, Greg was lying on his back. All of his classmates were gathered around him in awe. Maria leaned in close. He heard her whisper, Wow. Benny stared steadily right into Greg's eyes. Cool. Greg felt triumphant. He tried to open his mouth to shout, I told you so, but nothing happened. Struggling to sit up, he realized his body wouldn't respond. The only thing he could feel at all was a deep, penetrating cold. The cold of the grave. His nostrils were filled with the smell of countless centuries of decay now. Mrs. Reed leaned over Greg. She was smiling. Yes, children, the boy king was the richest of the pharaohs. During his short life, he was probably one of the most important people on earth. You might say he was the richest, most famous boy who ever lived. Careful what was for, Man, that Flossie's smart, isn't she? Hello, Zay Ford. Glad to see you. So we have another one. Woo! Not sure how close we're coming to 13 of them, but we're getting there. This one is called Green Thumb. Where are you going, young lady? Mrs. Guerrero held up her hand as Leia headed for the door. I'm going with Dad. They're judging the entries for the tomato growing contest today. I want to get a look at the competition, so he's going to drive me to the fairgrounds earlier. Your mother shook her head. You know very well you're going to win that contest, just like you have for the past 3 years, darling. Well, I hope so. The girl raced to the kitchen door and grabbed a home-baked muffin as she sped by. It was still warm from the oven. Leia scrambled in the passenger seat of her dad's red pickup. All set, hon? He grinned. Leia nodded, her mouth full of food. After using that special soil mixture you've worked up, your tomatoes this year are going to be better than ever. Her father pulled the truck out of the driveway onto a narrow dirt road that led to the highway. Yeah, I know that the soil mixture really did work well, Dad, but I think I've come up with a few things to make the plants grow even bigger and faster. I've added them to the old compost pit behind the stone wall at the far side of the house. Is that okay? I don't see why not, hon. No one ever goes back there anyway. Mr. Guerrero turned the pickup truck onto the main highway. Now, the following morning, Leia was up bright and early. First, she put out a bowl of milk for Jake, her orange and white striped kitten. Meow. And then she proudly added her new blue ribbon to the others displayed in the glass cabinet in the living room. Later, she and her mom cleared a large patch near the barn for pumpkins. Pumpkins! Yay! Sorry. Leia spread a thick layer of her newest special soil mixture over the area and worked it thoroughly with a hoe. After lunch, she rode her bike to the store to pick up some things for her mom. Hello, Laurel. I didn't say hello to you. And, hi, Leia. Mr. Warden, the grocer, looked up as she came in. Your order's ready. I have something for you here. He handed her a magazine. This came in a pack of seed catalogs, the only ones. I think it was a mistake. Anyway, here you go. It's about exotic plants. You might find something special in it for your garden, Leia. Gee, thanks, Mr. Warden. Leia slipped the gift into her grocery sack. When she got home, she curled up on her favorite window seat with the magazine. Jake paddled gently along the sill and stretched out in the sun beside her. A small ad in the back page caught Leia's attention. What's this? She said to herself. The kitten looked up as if waiting for her to say something more. Guaranteed to amaze. The world's most unusual vine only for the most accomplished of gardeners. Huh. Leia was intrigued and challenged. She filled out the little coupon provided and posted her order that very same day. Less than 1 week later, a small box addressed to Leia, simply marked Seeds, arrived in the mail. Makes me think of the Johnson Smith Company. Those were the days. Leia quickly ripped it open, the top from the packet and inside, and tapped a few light, dainty red seeds out into her hand. What are they? She asked aloud. The instructions of the packet just said to sow them near the surface and fertilize with bone meal. Leia got permission from her mom to plant the unusual seeds in a part of the area they had cleared for the pumpkin patch. Within 2 days, the first pale shoots showed themselves above the rich soil. Within a week, the plant was several inches high. Didn't Caledonia write a story about something like this, it seems like? Not sure. Wow, Jake, she said to her kitten. Can you believe this? Leia crouched down beside the young plant and rubbed one of its bright green leaves. Long, slender tendrils curled out from the stem. I've never seen anything grow so fast, except maybe you. Jake wasn't particularly interested, though. He discovered a small hole in the ground and was busily trying to excavate whatever had made it. Leia straightened up and looked at her chubby kitten. He turned his attention to a cricket, slapping at it with his paw. One well-placed blow stunned the insect. Good boy. You keep trying. I hope you turn out to be a natural ratter. You'll have plenty to keep you busy if you do. Leia headed for the house, then stopped short. Had she heard a soft sigh? Must have been the wind, she said. Or maybe one of those timbers from down in the mine. Well. Behind her, a thread-like plant tendril snaked out and wrapped tightly around the motionless cricket. Jake laid his ears back, bared his teeth, and hissed at the slender stalk dragged the tiny body of the cricket into the soil. Why do I feel an on-the-fly edit coming up and don't feel so good for Jake? Well, I guess we'll see what happens, huh? During the summer, Leia usually slept with her window open. She liked to fall asleep listening to the sounds of the night. One evening, just as she was drifting off, she heard a strange but familiar sound. Opening her eyes wide, she listened carefully. It was a soft, wistful sigh, almost a moan. Where had she heard that before? Rising quietly, she crossed to the open window and tried to peer into the dark. A sharp squeal pierced the night, then another. Both came from the garden. Once again, everything was still. It sounds like rats, she said under her breath. Jake must be on the prowl. From then on, Leia heard the fearful squeals every night. Each day she tended her peculiar plant, which seemed to grow more lush by the hour. The barn wall was nearly covered with long, twining tendrils. Trumpet-shaped, blood-red flowers covered much of it, and she counted 8 long, gnarly seed pods hanging from the highest vines. One morning she decided to add more of the treated miracle soil she had come up with from her compost pit around the plant's roots. Leia's mind was not on her work, however, as she dug her hands into the ground. She was worried about Jake. He hadn't shown up for breakfast. See, I knew it. Leia had already planned to search for Jake when she felt a slight sting. Yanking her hands away from the thick, dark brown earth, she watched as a tiny droplet of blood formed at the tip of one finger. Dang it! I should have been wearing gloves, she mumbled, wondering what might have caused the small cut. Looking down, she noticed that the end of a single root protruded just above the soil. The pale greenish point was smeared with a tiny bit of blood. Leia touched it lightly. It was sharp. Suddenly the root seemed to quiver, and it moved slightly toward the blood on her cut finger. She drew back her hand and jumped up. I think I've been working in the sun too long. I'm letting my imagination play tricks on me. Wow, that treated soil of yours certainly speeds up the growth, her mom commented over dinner that night. I used just a little on my azaleas, and I could swear they shot up a foot in less than a week. I can't imagine what an entire potful would do. It's certainly done wonders for your new plant, too. I don't think I've ever seen such a healthy vine. Yeah, thanks, Mom, Leia responded, but she was still a little troubled. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something evil about that strange vine. Her dad added, I think our little Jake deserves a round of applause, too. He's turned out to be quite a ratter. I haven't laid eyes on a single rat in the barn for more than a week. By the way, where is Jake? I don't know, Dad. I haven't seen him since yesterday. I looked for him all afternoon. Leia was worried. That's odd, her father mused. Come to think of it, a lot of our pets have been reported missing lately. Liz Burson told me her boy's pet goat wandered off a couple days ago, and they haven't seen it since. Her mom patted Leia's hand. Oh, I'm sure Jake's all right, honey. Cats can take care of themselves. He'll be back. I hope so, Mom, Leia murmured. When Jake didn't show up the next morning for breakfast, Leia was certain something was wrong. She decided to look for him once again in the barn. They had no livestock, so the barn was used mainly for storage. It was a perfect hiding place for rodents and thus an ideal hunting ground for a clever cat. The old wooden door screeched as she entered the cool, dark building. The only other sound was that of her own footsteps on the hard-packed earth. Jake, come on, where are you, boy? There was no response. Her dad was right. There were no rats anywhere. In fact, there seemed to be no insects either. Nothing living except scanning the base of the wall, she saw dozens of curling green tendrils growing in through the cracks in the boards. In the darkened corner, one strand was wrapped so tightly around something she couldn't quite make out what it was. She walked to the spot and nudged the vine with her foot. The limp tail of a very dead rat protruded from within the coil. Leia felt the hair rise on the back of her neck, and there, near the body of the rat, was Jake's empty blue collar. She edged out of the barn and backed into the garden. As she moved near the vine, she felt something lightly touch her leg. Jake? Lifting back a wide leaf, she was horrified to see a thick plant tendril shoot out and twine around her leg, tightening all the while. Dad! Dad! She screamed with all her might. In no time, her parents were beside her. It's attacking me! Get it off! Get it off! Her father quickly sliced through the stem with a pocket knife. Leia, what happened? Calm down. The plant, Dad. It's the reason there are no rats. It got Jake, too. I just know it did. Her mother stroked her hair. That's not possible, dear. It's only a plant. You just got tangled in it somehow. If it worries you, we'll dig it up. And burn it with a flamethrower? If that'll make you feel better, honey. Within the hour, Mr. Guerrero had unearthed the plant. When he came into the house, he smelled slightly of smoke. Did you burn it, Dad? Yes, honey. I don't have a flamethrower, but I burned every leaf, every flower, and all those weird seed pods, too. He decided it was best not to tell Leia about the collection of small bones he had uncovered at its roots. That night, Leia lay awake in her room, straining to hear the dreaded sound. Her parents had already gone to bed when she heard it, but it was not where she expected. The noise came not from the garden near the barn, but from the far side of the house. Beyond the stone wall, about 30 yards away, the area where she had so carefully tended her large pit of specially treated soil. Jake? She sat up. Maybe Jake really is okay. Maybe he just ran away and now he's come home. Slipping on her pair of slippers, Leia crept downstairs to the kitchen. She reached for a flashlight that hung near the door and stepped outside. It was a dark, moonless night. She pointed the flashlight toward the sound to light her path. All the while she softly called, Here, kitty. Here, Jake. Come on, boy. Pebbles scattered as Leia climbed over the crumbling stone wall on the far side of the house. The gentle sound, barely more than a moan, made her freeze in her tracks. Stunned, she lifted the flashlight's beam, illuminated a huge vine that was part of a gigantic plant. It grew directly from the pit of special soil and covered the entire wall. Before Leia could open her mouth to scream, a slim tendril slid around her throat. Its leaves covered her face. The flashlight clattered to the ground. The flashlight's beam of light slowly faded as dawn approached. A gentle breeze rustled the strong, healthy vine growing in the shadows. At its crown, a long, gnarly seed pod suddenly split open, just as one had a few days before on the parent plant. The breeze lifted the small red seeds in the pod and carried them aloft, scattering them in every direction. Feed me, Seymour. See, Jake's fine. Okay, yeah, Leia's, toast, but whatever. At least the kitty's fine. Okay, onward. So our next one is... Oh, yes, and lest we forget, coming up at 9 o'clock. So our next story is Crying Wolf. I know you don't believe me, but I'm certain it's true. Anne turned her lower lip down in a pout. Come on, Anne, think about it, Byron soothed. It just isn't possible that zookeepers are really animals in human form. It doesn't make any sense. Byron and Anne were very close friends. They had grown up next door to each other, and he was used to her quirky imagination. Not only did Anne believe strongly in ghosts, vampires, and werewolves, she often made up sinister explanations for the most innocent of events. One of her very closest friends when she was growing up was a young fellow named Rick. And since a class trip to the zoo last week, Anne had decided that zookeepers were really animals that had taken temporary human form. She claimed that the beasts planned to lure unsuspecting youngsters into their lair and then devour them. What makes you so sure that they aren't? Anne demanded for the third time. Anne, Byron tried again. Anne, didn't everybody come back from the zoo? Is anyone missing? She simply waved her hand and insisted, We were just lucky this time. Byron shook his head as he watched his friend walk away. What kind of story did she cook up this time? John asked, and had crept up, and now he playfully punched Byron on the arm. Does she still think the night janitor's a vampire? He curled his fingers in imitation claws and bared his teeth. No, John, don't make fun of her. She's going to be a great writer someday, like that Paolini guy. You'll be proud that you knew her. John laughed, but Byron was serious. One of the things that he and Anne shared was a love of science fiction and horror stories. When they were little, they would spend hours reading sci-fi and scary books and magazines. Eventually, Anne began to make up her own stories. She had notebooks full of them, and Byron loved reading each and every one. She even had worked up the courage to send her favorite story to Horror Tales magazine. Byron shrugged. It's just that sometimes she lets her imagination get the best of her, John raised his eyebrows. Right, she's a regular Edgar Allan Poe. After dinner that evening, Byron gathered up his books and went next door. He and Anne usually did their work together. At a table in the brightly lit kitchen, they were reviewing a list of the state capitals when Anne suddenly looked over her shoulder. Did you see that? Byron looked around. See what, Anne? It was something. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. It moved. No, Anne, there's nothing. I saw something. And when you looked, it wasn't there. Yes. Byron nodded. Yeah, I know. Everybody does that sometimes. It's an optical illusion or something. They returned to their studies, but Byron noticed that Anne kept shifting her gaze from side to side. Uh-oh, Byron thought. What's she going to come up with now? It didn't take long for him to find out. The next morning on the bus, Anne was a little jumpy. You look tired, Byron remarked as he slid into the seat next to Anne. I am. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Do you remember when I told you I thought I saw something on the corner of my eye in the kitchen? What happened again after you left? And I told you everybody sees that. It's nothing to worry about. No, listen. There really was something there. It was a small, dark shape, like a little creature, a graveling or a gremlin, maybe. You mean you saw a cute little fuzzy pointed-eared beastie? Byron teased. Oh no, now we're all in terrible trouble. Anne twisted away and looked out the window. You don't believe me. At lunchtime, Byron and his friends always ate in the shade of the largest tree in the playground. He barely had a chance to open his lunchbox before John started poking around. Is that a ham and cheese? John craned his neck to see the sandwich that Byron was unwrapping. If it is, I'll give you my tuna fish. No, thanks. I'll throw in a bag of potato chips. Anne pulled her lunch from her brown bag. If you want peanut butter and jelly, I'll trade with you, John. John laughed. How do I know it's peanut butter and jelly, Anne, and not crunchy werewolf tongues and bat's blood? John put his hands to his throat, crossed his eyes, did an imitation of choking. The other kids giggled, and Anne looked embarrassed. Byron was quick to come to her aid. Anything would be better than that cat food you eat every day, John. He winked at Anne. John looked sheepish. You're right. I can't face another day of tuna fish. I was only joking. Peanut butter sounds great, Anne. Anne smiled good-naturedly, and they exchanged sandwiches. John eagerly unwrapped his prize. What? Are you kidding? Somebody already had been eating at this. He held out the sandwich to show the tiny bites that had been taken all the way around. Well, it must have been a mouse or something, Byron ventured on the bus ride home. A mouse, Anne pointed out, would not rewrap the sandwich after it had taken a few bites. It was them, Byron. I know who they are. I wrote a story about creatures just like them a while ago, hungry little beasts from a sort of parallel dimension. She paused as if a thought had suddenly occurred to her. That must be it, she said softly. Anne seemed to be talking more to herself than to her friend. I know who they are, and now that I know who they are, they have to get rid of me, Byron. They have to get rid of me. They're all around. They're just waiting until the right time when I'm all alone. No. Are you still talking about your gremlins? I told you it's just an optical illusion, Byron said. But what if it isn't, Byron? What if they really are there, preying on humans as they please, perhaps as food, picking us off one by one? People disappear every day. I think I like this girl. Byron felt the hair rise in the back of his neck. Now she was giving him the creeps. And if that's true, why can't I see them? Because you don't believe they're there. You won't let yourself see them. But I did. And now it's too late for me. I know their secret. I'm a threat to them, and they have to get rid of me, Byron. And you're letting your imagination get the better of you. Am I? Is this my imagination? What makes you so sure? She held out the book report that she had been working on the night before. A faint trail of very small, human-like footprints ran along the side of the page. The next day, Anne showed Byron a large bruise and a scratch on her leg and claimed that they were getting bolder. I'm really frightened, Byron. They're after me now. I'm afraid that one night they'll come for me and I'll just disappear. Have you talked to your parents? Yeah, they think I'm making it all up. You believe me, don't you, Byron? She said almost in tears. You believe that they're really real, don't you? Byron wasn't sure what to say. He wanted to help his friend. Finally, he whispered, Yeah, Anne, I believe you. And just then, for a split second, Byron thought he caught a glimpse of movement nearby. Byron couldn't sleep that night either. He was too worried about Anne. Although it was almost midnight, he could see from his window that the light in her room was still on. At last, he pulled on his clothes and quietly opened his bedroom window and climbed out into the yard. He crept up to Anne's window. He intended to tap on the glass and ask her to come out, but he never got the chance. As he leaned toward the window, Byron saw the lamp beside her bed crash to the floor in an explosion of glass. When it fell, he thought he saw Anne crouched at the foot of her bed as if she were trying to hide. Her face was twisted in horror, and something else, too. 2 or 3 small figures, half human, half beast, loping toward her on long, thin legs, where their claws, hands extended, maybe. There just wasn't enough time, not enough light. A chill ran down his spine. Had one of the little beings actually turned and looked directly at him with glittering cat-like eyes? He couldn't be sure. Suddenly, the overhead light blazed. Anne's father entered the room. Her mother stood near the door with her hand on the light switch. Byron crouched down. He watched them scan the bedroom, pick up the broken lamp. He heard them call Anne's name, but she was nowhere to be found. Byron didn't know what to do. He quickly crossed the distance between the two houses and slipped back into his own bedroom window. As he was changing back into his pajamas, the telephone rang. He stepped into the darkened hall and saw his mother through the open door of the family room. She was speaking to the receiver. What? No, Angela. Byron's already in bed. Well, she certainly isn't here. Yeah. Oh, okay, Angela. I'll talk to him. Then we'll be right over, right? Byron couldn't decide what to do. He wasn't really sure what had happened in his friend's now empty bedroom. He quickly slipped back to his room and into bed. He could hear his parents' worried voices in the other room. A moment later, a sliver of brightness shone under his bedroom door. There was a knock, and his mother opened the door. His father stood behind her. Light from the hall spilled into the room and pooled at the foot of Byron's bed. I'm sorry to wake you, dear, but Mrs. Yates just called. She said that Anne is gone. All her things are there, but she's missing. Did she say anything to you tonight? Was she upset? Did you have any idea where she might be? Byron sat up. What could he say? How could he convince him? He knew it sounded crazy, but he said, Yes, I think she's in trouble. She told me there were these things, like gremlins, that were after her. I don't want to hear that kind of nonsense, Byron's father warned. We all know about her wild imagination, but this is serious. He looked at his parents. They'd never believe him. He wasn't even sure that he did, but he had to do something. He threw the covers back and jumped out of bed. It's not just her imagination. You've got to do something, Byron pleaded. I looked at her window. I saw them myself. Or at least, I think I did. His parents glanced at each other. They were small and they had claws and sharp teeth. I think they took her away. Maybe they killed her. Don't you believe me? He looked from one to the other. You don't believe me. Byron's father put his arm around his son's shoulder. How can we, Byron? I know this upsets you, but you can't start making up monsters to solve real problems. There's no time for such things. Anne might have run away. She could be in danger. Now, did she say anything to you that might help? Byron felt himself go limp. Anne had really been upset. Maybe she really did run away. Maybe he had dreamed the whole thing. No, Dad. She didn't say anything to me. All right, then. We're going next door to see if we can help. Is there anything I can do? His mother reached out and stroked his hair. Not now, honey. Just go back to bed. We'll talk about it in the morning. Byron looked out across the garden and saw his parents entering the house next door. Yeah, but what if it wasn't a dream? What if Anne had been right? He glanced down and his gaze fell on something on the sill of his open window. It was a tiny footprint of some sort. Something that he had seen once before. Then just out of the corner of his eye, a slight movement caught his attention. But he turned to find nothing there. Ooh, crying wolf. Arr! No eating after midnight. Well, you're still here, my gosh. I think your ranks are growing. Not that I'm saying you're ranked, understand. I'm just saying. Yeah, glad you're here. So our next one is No Laughing Matter. Mm-hmm. One moment. Oh, the throat's demanding the last of the cough drops. Everyone has something that they're really good at. Gordy Davis was probably the best at being just plain mean. Gordy was bigger than the other kids in his class, and he always came out the winner in a fight. But that wasn't good enough for Gordy. He and his four closest friends, Pat, Larry, Jasper, and Roy, spent hours figuring out practical jokes and that would make other people miserable. The more mean-spirited the prank, the better they liked it. They had formed a club called the Jokers, and each of the boys wore a cap adorned with that name. Now, most of the other kids in class tried to stay out of their way and were careful not to annoy them. The mysterious stranger has appeared. Hello, mysterious stranger. Most of the other kids, in fact, did everything they could to stay out of the Joker's way and be careful not to annoy them. No one ever told an adult about the spiteful things the boys did. Some actually did favors for the Jokers, hoping to stay on their good side. Mitch Harrigan did Gordy's math homework every day. Even that didn't always save Mitch, though. The week before, Mitch had gotten several answers wrong, and Gordy received a C-. On Friday, Mitch found his bicycle wedged among the low branches of a tree. The jokers stood around and had a good laugh while he tried to get it down. At first, no one would risk helping Mitch, but when the bike started to fall, the new kid in town, Rick Porter, raced forward and steadied it. Ricks are always such good guys, aren't they? He then helped Mitch lift the bicycle down to the ground while Gordy glared. Rick and his parents had moved to town during the summer, and this was his first year at Washington Elementary. It hadn't taken him long to make friends. He was easygoing, fun to be with. He was also one of the few kids who did not back down from the jokers. For a while, Gordy had avoided Rick. Now he'd have to be dealt with, too. So Monday morning, Gordy joined his buddies on the playground before class began. "Did you get it?" he whispered to Roy. "Yeah." The boy proudly held up a small brown paper bag. He turned his head from side to side, to be sure no one was watching. He reached in the bag and pulled out a large glass jar. It was half filled with squirming mealworms. Jasper made an ugly face. "Oh, yuck, those are disgusting." "Perfect," Gordy smirked. "This should teach that little creep to mind his own business." "And if it doesn't, I've got something else in mind. Now remember," he said as he put a hand on Larry's shoulder, "you wait until everyone else put their things away on the shelf, and you go back like you're going to put your stuff away too, got it?" "Yeah, I know." Larry shifted uneasily. "Well, nobody's looking at dump the creepy crawlers into Rick's lunchbox. What if I get caught? How come I have to do it?" Gordy tightened his hold on the boy's shoulder. "Because I said so. Besides, your section on the shelf is right next to Rick's. Nobody noticed what you're doing. I'll see to that. Now let's go." The boys joined the group of children waiting in the school hall. Once Mrs. Jandrew unlocked and opened the door, they all filed in. Chattering and laughing, the kids walked back to the back of the room. Lining the back wall was a tall set of wooden shelves divided into sections. Each section had a student's name written above it on a paper label. The cubicles were used to store coats and extra books and lunch boxes or anything else not needed during class. Larry watched as Rick stuffed his baseball jacket into the space under his name and then set his lunchbox down. Once everyone was sitting down, Larry stood nervously and picked up his sweater and the paper sack Roy had given him. He sauntered to the shelf and, with his back to the room, slipped out the glass jar and unscrewed the lid. At that moment, Gordy jumped up, pointed at the teacher's desk, and yelled, "Mrs. Jandrew, a mouse!" Several of the kids squealed, and Mrs. Jandrew hastily pushed back her chair. During the commotion, Larry opened the lid of Rick's lunchbox, tipped in the worms, and snapped the box shut. He was back in his seat by the time the teacher was announced. There was nothing under her desk. "Yeah, well, guess I was mistaken," Jordy grinned as he sat down. He turned to look at his accomplice, Larry, and Larry nodded slightly at him. At lunchtime, the jokers could hardly control their laughter as they watched Rick settle at a table with several friends. Rick had purchased a container of fruit punch and opened it while he listened to one of the group explain the gory details of a movie he had seen over the weekend. It was about a town that had been attacked by thousands of deadly snakes. As he described a scene in which the hero woke up and found his bed covered with slithering reptiles, Rick, without looking, popped open his lunchbox and reached inside. Snakes? Why did it have to be snakes? "Ah!" he howled, spilling the entire carton of punch down the front of his shirt. Rick yanked his hand away as if he had been bitten. The lunchbox tipped out onto its side, and several dozen wriggling mealworms rolled out. Everyone at the table shrieked. The boy who had been telling the story jumped up so quickly that his chair tipped over and clattered to the floor. The uproar spread to the kids seated nearby. They squealed and backed away, scraping their chairs across the floor in alarm or tipping them over, adding to the chaos. Gordy couldn't hold back. He laughed so hard he doubled over in his chair. When things quieted down, he sat up to see Rick standing over him. "You did that, didn't you?" the enraged boy demanded. Gordy smirked. "What's the matter? Can't take a joke?" It wasn't a joke, and it wasn't funny. Rick was so angry, almost in tears. His hands were bunched into fists. "Stupid. Like you." Gordy rose slowly. He towered over the boy. "Take that back. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of you or anything else." Gordy's mouth twisted into a crooked scowl, and slowly a different expression washed over his face. "Okay. Prove it." "What? You're right. That was a mean thing for me to do. But I'll tell you what. If you can prove that you really aren't afraid of anything, if you accept my challenge, then I'll apologize and I'll never pick on you again. We could even be friends." Gordy's pals exchanged surprised glances. I don't want to be your friend, Rick growled. But you would apologize in front of everyone? Yeah. You wouldn't bother me again? Guaranteed. What sort of challenge? Gordy lowered his voice conspiratorially. Have you ever heard of the Banwell place? Rick nodded. Everyone knew of the old house. It was one of the first things he had learned from the other kids when he came to town. Most people avoided even walking past it if they could. No one was certain who had been the original owner, but old Mr. Banwell was supposed to have lived in it for at least 30 years. He'd been pretty eccentric and even fancied himself like a warlock or something. People said that on some nights they could see weird lights moving through the halls and hear strange noises. Nobody really knew how the old man had died either. One day about 10 years ago, the postman had found Banwell face down out in his front yard. When he rolled Banwell over, the expression frozen on the dead man's face had been one of unearthly terror. Well, Gordy went on, all you has to do is spend 1 hour in there, starting at midnight. Rick's jaw dropped open. Alone? My parents never let me do that. Don't worry. I'll have a sleepover at my house this weekend. My parents won't even notice if we sneak out. It'll be over before you know it, if you're really brave enough. Deal? He extended his hand. Rick reached out and took it. Yeah, deal. After school, Gordy and his cohorts walked home. At first they were silent, then Pat spoke up. Are you really going to apologize to that little jerk in front of everybody? Nah, Gordy said, shaking his head. He'll never make it through an hour in that house. But what if he does? Jasper complained. He won't. We're going to fix it so he won't stay in there more than a few minutes. I've got it all figured out. The gleam of evil in Gordy's eyes made the other boys shudder. Over the next few days, the gang worked on props for the weekend. On Saturday morning, the boys slipped into the Banwell house through a slide window and set everything up. I don't like it in here, Larry whined. I don't know if this is such a good idea. Roy was making a sizable stain on the wall with fake blood. It's a great idea. If this place is so creepy during the day, imagine how bad it'll be at night, eh? Particularly when we're finished up with it, eh? He winked at Jasper, who had just taken a large dead rat from his shoebox. Where should I put this thing? Jasper asked, holding the rat by the tail as far away from him as he could. Gordy looked around. I don't know. Put it near the window. When the chick flashlight goes out, he'll probably try to open the curtains to get more light. Pat shuddered. He might step on it. That's gross. Yeah, but that'll be the best gag of all. Gordy slipped into a tape into a complicated-looking player he had hidden in a closet near the staircase. He stood back and pushed a button on a small remote control that he held in his hand. At first, there was a soft, eerie shuffling noise. Then came a sound of ragged breathing that seemed to be coming closer. That's great, Roy giggled. Suddenly, a horrible moan issued from the tape player and filled the room. It's enough for me. I'm getting out of here. Laughing and horsing around, they ran most of the way back to Gordy's house. Now, that night, Rick's parents dropped him off at Gordy's house for the sleepover. The boys spent the evening watching a scary movie and telling ghost stories. As midnight approached, Gordy began a tale about the Banwell house. Folks say that old Mr. Banwell used to conjure up spirits and stuff. After he died, his daughter took over the house. She was some sort of a professor or something and didn't believe the things that people were saying. Like about the lights and the noises. Everything seemed to be all right at first, but then on the first night of the new moon, something happened. It was a night kind of like the night, you know. The Hansons who lived down the hill from the old place said that it was shortly after midnight when they heard the moaning. That horrible moaning. In the morning they found her, Banwell's daughter, wandered in the woods behind the house. Her long black hair had turned completely white. She kept talking about the thing, begging it to leave her alone. From what she said, the sheriff figured it had one arm and one terrible glowing eye, and it smelled like... yeah, well, it was that old musty smell that comes from something that's been buried for a long, long time. The rumor is that a couple years later, they found another body just sitting on the porch. It was a kid who had been missing for a while. At least they thought it was him. You see, it didn't have no head. Of course, that can't be true. Gordy paused for an effect. Or can it? With an exaggerated shiver, Gordy looked at the clock. Come on, it's time. One at a time, the boys eased out of the bedroom window. No one spoke as they approached the dark, brooding house. The windows stared down at them like demon eyes that crept up the walk to the porch. Here, you'll need this. Gordy slipped a flashlight into Rick's hand. You have to go through that open window there, he said as he pointed to the one near the door, the one that the jokers had used in the morning when they set up the prank. It's the only way in or out. Everything else is locked or boarded up. We'll stay here to be sure you don't sneak out, eh? He looked at the glowing numbers on his watch. Both hands pointed straight up. Go! Rick didn't say anything, but he was trembling. Now, see, obviously this is Rick Porter and not Rick Quarkin. Rick Quarkin would have brought popcorn and been totally thrilled and excited about this opportunity, but this is Rick Porter. And Rick Porter was trembling as he crawled over the windowsill. He began to have a change of heart. With a shaking hand, he played the beam of light around the deserted room. He froze as he noticed the brick-red blood splashed against the wall. Forcing his feet to move, Rick edged along the opposite wall. His foot nudged something soft. Just before the flashlight failed, he saw the body of a rat. Outside, Gordy pressed a button. Inside, there was a soft, muffled, scraping noise, and Rick backed toward the open window as the sound of ragged breathing seemed to come from everywhere. The moan had only begun when Rick scrambled back out of the window and down the path. Again proving Rick P. and not Rick Q. Nothing's worth staying in there, he gasped. You can keep your apology and your stupid club. What did I tell you? Gordy gloated to the others as he watched Rick disappear down the block. The boys exchanged high fives. Larry patted Gordy on the back and chuckled. Can't wait to tell everyone tomorrow about the look on his face that came flying out of that window. Now, can we get out of here? This place is giving me the willies. Everybody laughed in agreement, including Gordy. Yeah, sure we can. Just as soon as we get the tape recorder. After stopped. You mean go in there? Now? Pat gawked at Gordy. Of course now. You think I'm going to leave it there? Larry started to back away from the others. I'm not going in there. Me neither, Jasper whispered. Gordy looked from one to the other. What's the matter with you guys? Roy? Come on. Roy shook his head. You're so brave, Gordy. Why don't you go in alone? Well, then I guess I will. What a bunch of chickens. Bark, bark, bark. Angrily, Gordy ducked into the open window. Once inside, he switched on the flashlight. It sputtered to life, then failed, leaving him in shadow once again. Yeah, stupid thing. It's no better than one I gave Rick. Slowly, Gordy eased forward into the room and moved toward the staircase. The boards creaked under his feet. If there was something was in this house, it would surely know he was here, too. He brushed the thought aside. There's nothing. There's nothing in here. There's nothing in here, Gordy assured himself. That was when he heard the slight shuffling sound that seemed to be moving closer. He felt in his pocket. The remote control was gone. Yeah, right, guys. Very funny. Ah. A ragged breathing began by the time he reached the closet door. Gripping the handle, he opened it. Oh, yeah, that's funny. He wrinkled his nose and he detected a powerful, musty odor. Ah, dang. I didn't notice that smell this morning. Ugh. He knelt down to pick up his tape recorder. As he heard the low, chilling moan behind him, his brain barely registered the tape recorder was not running. The taste of fear welled up in Gordy's mouth as he whirled to stare into the single glowing eye of horror. The foul, putrid stench grew overpowering as the huge, shadowy creature loomed over its crouching victim. Cloaked in rotten rags, its skeletal arm darted out and gripped Gordy's throat in one clawed hand. The thing drew him across the floor, opening its gaping mouth to reveal many rows of serrated teeth. I get so few visitors here, it rasped, lifting the terrified boy completely off the ground. But those who join me never leave. I guess the joke is on you. And so that was No Laughing Matter. Oh, right. I think we have time for one more. We got 11 minutes. Might have time for two more if I hurry up. So you want to win? No shame if you're done and want to sneak off, but you do come back by 9. All right, here we go. Brain pictures. 15-year-old Jenna Paisley's eyes were riveted on the book she was reading. Awesome, Jenna exclaimed. She was slouched on her brother Jerry's bed. What? Jerry asked, looking over his shoulder, an avid model of airplane buff. Jerry was sitting at his desk working on a B-29, a bomber airplane used during World War II. This book I'm reading, Jenna replied, is about people with weird powers. You mean things like ESP and all that other goofy psychic stuff you think you've got? Jerry asked. Jenna rolled her eyes. No. The part I'm reading now is about a man named Ted Sirios. Back in the 60s, he took photographs of things in his mind. By the way, if you Google that, you'll actually find that. Yeah, right, Jerry scoffed. No, it's for real, Jenna insisted. Listen, I'll read what it says. Surrounded by at least a dozen witnesses, Ted Sirios of Chicago repeatedly aimed an instant picture camera directly into his own eye. When he saw something passing through his mind, he snapped a picture. Among the brain pictures that Sirios took were an image of the White House's dome and the Queen of England. Conducting scientifically controlled experiments performed inside a solid steel chamber, Jenna read on, scientists themselves took many of the photographs and would not even allow Sirios to touch the camera. In fact, 25 scientists signed statements that the test could not have been faked and that Sirios actually had been photographing his own thoughts. Yeah, whatever. It still sounds pretty hokey to me, Jerry said. You know what? Jenna exclaimed, jumping up from the bed and heading out of the room. I'm going to try it. I'm going to take pictures of the stuff in my brain. Won't work, Jerry called, following her into the family room. There's nothing in your brain, sis. He found Jenna rummaging through a closet. When she turned around, she was holding an old instant picture camera. Oh, good, she said, checking to see if there's any film in it. It's still got 9 shots left. Then, with Jerry shaking his head as he watched her, she sat down on the couch and looked straight into the lens with her right eye. Well, here goes nothing, she said, and opening her eye as wide as she could, she clicked the shutter. Instantly, the camera made a whining mechanical noise. A moment later, a picture emerged. And if you're old enough, you know that sounded very well, I'm sure. Weird, Jerry said, taking the self-developed print his sister handed him. Looks like a close-up of my face. You must turn the camera around really fast. I wasn't looking. You know I didn't, Jerry. You were right here watching me the whole time. She ran a hand through her hair, deep in thought. It does make sense, Jerry. I mean, think about it. Your face was the last thing I saw before I snapped the picture. Well, try doing it again, Jerry suggested, now genuinely intrigued by his sister's strange experiment. Maybe there was something to that weird Sirios guy. Again, Jenna aimed the camera. She closed her eyes, waiting for an image to pass through her mind, when she suddenly opened her eyes and clicked off a picture. When it came out of the camera, the two found themselves looking at a photograph of a Springer Spaniel. That's Ruffy, Jerry blurted. He's out in our backyard. This is so cool, Jenna cried with excitement. I was thinking about Ruffy. I saw him in my mind, playing the backyard just the way he used to. After staring at the picture of their dog that had died several years ago, Jerry took a couple of turns trying to take pictures of his own mind, but nothing came out but blurs. I wonder why it works for you and not for me, he said, frowning as he handed the camera back to his sister. To be honest, Jenna said, I don't know why I... Hey. Suddenly a faraway look came into Jenna's eyes. She quickly raised the camera and snapped a picture. Only the whirring sound made by the camera as the photograph came out seemed to jar Jenna out of her trance. Who is that? Jerry asked as he examined the photo and then handed it back to his sister. It was a picture of a little boy with neatly combed hair that looked like it had pieces of white confetti in it. He was holding a carton of some kind. I don't know. I never saw him before in my life. In fact, I don't remember what I was thinking about when I took that shot. She studied the picture for a moment, then tossed it aside with a shrug. She was just raising the camera at eye level to take another shot when the doorbell rang. With a groan, annoyed at being interrupted, Jenna got up and opened the front door. An icy winter breeze wafted into the house. But it wasn't the cold that sent a chill down Jenna's spine. A little boy, with white flecks of snow in his neatly combed hair, was looking up at her. And he was holding a carton of some kind. Hi, my name is Chad Ellis, and I'm selling candy to raise money for our soccer team. Jenna stared in disbelief. It was the same little boy in the picture she'd taken moments before in her mind. Seeing the shocked expression on Jenna's face, the boy stepped back. You okay? No, I'm not, Jenna mumbled. I don't want any candy. Wait, what? Don't want any candy? It's halfway to Halloween, girl. Are you crazy? Of course you want candy. Nonetheless, Jenna quickly shut the door. Jerry, you won't believe what just happened. Jenna yelled at the top of her lungs. She raced back to the family room. After telling Jerry about the little boy, Jenna sat at the edge of the sofa, still shaking. Jerry immediately wanted her to take more pictures, but she was reluctant. What had just happened had left her feeling disturbed and very jittery. Don't you get it? She asked, her voice trembling. The picture was of somebody I had never seen before. Well, you've always said you had premonitions and stuff, Jerry said with a shrug. Maybe you do have ESP. I admit that sometimes I get feeling that something's going to happen, Jenna replied. I've never seen them in my head, let alone taken pictures of them. So you're telling me that before that kid came to the door, you never saw him in your head? He never crossed your mind even once? No, that's what I've been trying to tell you, Jerry, Jenna said, getting frustrated. The premonition was there, but I didn't know what it was until I photographed it. Jerry handed her the camera. Come on, Jenna. Take some more pictures. I mean, this is just too cool to stop doing it now. Jenna was just about to say no when suddenly a strange, eerie feeling swept over her. She quickly put the lens to her eye, and then, like a person possessed, she took one shot after another, not even bothering to see what was coming out. Not until she was out of film did she finally stop. After all the prints had developed, the two kids laid them out on the floor and studied them. Weird, Jerry said in a hushed tone. There was a picture of her mom's favorite necklace tangled in a shrub, and there was one of an ordinary telephone, seemingly the one in the family room, but with something spilled on it. The next shot was of the back door of their house. It was opened onto the backyard. The last one was a hooded, dark blue jacket with red cuffs. I don't know what to make of all this, Jerry, Jenna said, scanning the pictures. Suddenly the two kids jumped when a door slammed. Hello, their mom called. We're home. Jenna pushed the camera and the pictures behind the sofa. Then she and Jerry hurried out to greet their parents. I know we're late, their mom said. Hope you guys weren't worried, but they had a big sale over at Sports World, and your dad and I decided to check it out. The dad smiled and reached into a big shopping bag. Sorry I couldn't find anything your size, Jenna, he said, then turned to Jerry. We did find something for you, sport. He pulled a nylon jacket from the bag. I know you like to wear things oversized, so we got you a large. Thanks, Dad, Jerry said, looking at the jacket and swallowing back a wave of fear. The jacket was dark blue, hooded, and had red cuffs. Jenna and Jerry were too freaked out to tell their parents about Jenna's mind pictures. Besides, right after dinner, their mom and dad took off for their workouts at the gym, so there wasn't time to get into it anyway. Let's go down to the drugstore and buy some more film, Jerry said excitedly as soon as their parents had left. As curious as her brother, Jenna agreed, and the two hurried to the corner drugstore through fleecy, drifting snow. When they returned, they made some cocoa to warm up. Then they headed into the family room where they began to take more pictures of the images in Jenna's mind. The first two pictures were scary. One showed a man with a pockmarked face and thick eyebrows, the other with a close-up of an outstretched hand with only 3 fingers. The picture of the 3-fingered man gave them the creeps, and the next one was completely horrified them. It was a picture of Jerry in his new jacket lying face down in a pool of blood on the back walkway. Jerry looked down at his new jacket, which he had been wearing ever since they got it down to the drugstore. I'm taking this off, he announced, and put down the last photo on the end table next to the sofa. I'm afraid to even look at this last picture, he said with a shudder. Jenna was reaching for the photo, and Jerry was starting to unbutton his jacket when suddenly both kids froze and their eyes went wide as saucers. From a back room there came the tinkle of breaking glass and the sound of footsteps. Somebody's in the house, Jerry whispered. Then turning abruptly, he bumped into Jenna, knocking the cup of cocoa in her hand and splashing it all over the phone. We have to stay calm, Jenna whispered back, hair standing up on the back of their necks. The two listened as the floorboards creaked in the hallway. Then they heard the clinking of silver in the dining room. We're being robbed, Jerry whispered. I'm going to take a look. You duck behind the sofa. Tiptoeing to the door, Jerry peeked down the hallway. Hey, punk, snarled the voice. From her hiding place behind the sofa, Jenna saw her brother being pulled out into the hall by a man with bushy eyebrows and a pock-marked face. "Is anyone else in this house?" the man demanded. No, nobody else is here," Jerry gasped, his voice reduced to a hoarse whisper by a stranglehold on his neck. "You better not be lying to me, punk," the man growled. "Now lead the way to where your parents keep their good stuff." Still hiding, Jenna heard receding voices and footsteps that seemed to be headed toward her parents' bedroom. Trying to figure out what to do, she scanned the room for a weapon, then her eyes fell on the phone across the room, was still drenched in the cocoa Jerry had caused her to spill. All at once, a dark thought hit her. That was one of the pictures she had taken. What if the other photographs she'd taken came true as well? In her mind's eye, she could see the picture that terrified her the most, the one of Jerry lying on the back walkway in a pool of his own blood. "I've got to get to that phone," she whimpered, growing more upset by the moment. "I've got to call the police." Taking a deep breath, Jenna began to ease out from her hiding place. She'd almost reached the phone when suddenly, from another room, came the sound of a scuffle. There was a yell of anger from Jerry, quickly followed by a loud thunk. Then heavy footfalls sounded in the house. Cautiously, Jenna made her way from the family room, and as she did, she caught a glimpse of her brother hurrying out the back door after the burglar. "No, Jerry!" she screamed, running through the house. "Just let him go!" But she was too late. From outside, there was a yelp followed by a sickening thud. "Jerry!" Jenna cried, hurrying out the back door into the ice-cold air, where she stopped and stared in horror. And there, still wearing his new jacket, was Jerry, in the same position as he'd been in the photograph, face down in his own blood. "No!" she sobbed as she knelt down and turned him over. But it wasn't Jerry. Instead, lying unconscious in a growing pool of his own blood, was the man with the pock-marked face. Confused, Jenna looked around and saw a green trash bag lying open in the snow right next to a shrub with her mom's favorite necklace tangled in the branches. Then suddenly, from inside the house, she heard Jerry yelling to her, his voice oddly muffled. Hurrying into his house, she found her brother lying on his side in the hallway. His hands were tied and with a gag in his mouth, and he wasn't wearing his jacket. Right away, Jenna realized what had happened. The burglar had stolen Jerry's new oversized jacket along with everything else, then had slipped on the ice and knocked himself out while fleeing out the back door. "Hang on, Jerry," Jenna said to her brother, whose eyes were wide as he struggled to say something to her. "I'll have this gag off in a minute." She was still working on the gag when suddenly she heard the burglar groaning outside. "Oh no, he's starting to come to." Leaving Jerry's gag still partially tied, she raced off. "I'll be right back," she called over her shoulder to her still struggling brother. "I've got to call the police before that guy regains consciousness and gets away." "Jenna!" Jerry yelled, his voice still muffled by the gag. "Hold on," Jenna called as she quickly punched in 911. Within seconds, Jenna had the police dispatcher on the line and was nervously describing what had happened. As she spoke, her eyes fell into the photos she had taken earlier. They were still lying scattered on the end table. "Jenna!" Jerry yelled, his voice clear now that he managed to work the gag out of his mouth. "Jenna, get out of the house!" "A squad car's on its way," the police dispatcher said. "Please stay on the line." But Jenna was too petrified to answer. Her gaze was fixed on the last photograph, the one she hadn't seen until now. It was a picture of herself, lying on her back on the floor, her own dead, glazed eyes staring sightlessly back at her. "There were 2 burglars! The other one's still in the house!" Jerry exclaimed. Horrified, Jenna heard a creak behind her. Slowly, stiffly, almost robotically, she turned around as a 3-fingered hand suddenly closed over her mouth. Brain pictures. Well, all right then. So I do hope you enjoyed